Does the gentleman from North Carolina seek recognition?
I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 6, printed in Part C of House Report number 114-216, offered by Mr. Butterfield of North Carolina.
Pursuant to House Resolution 369, the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Butterfield, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from North Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I rise in support of my amendment that will ensure that vulnerable communities are protected from the unsafe storage of coal combustion residuals known as coal ash. My amendment is simple. It would prevent the coal ash regulation framework in this bill from going into effect if states fail to protect vulnerable populations from the adverse effects of haphazard coal ash storage. Vulnerable populations defined in the amendment include infants, adolescents, pregnant women, the elderly, racial or ethnic groups, and others identified by the EPA administrator. The EPA estimates that 70% of coal ash impoundments are located in low-income communities. Coal ash impoundments lacking proper safeguards can fail, resulting in the leaching of harmful chemicals into surface and groundwater. Coal ash stored in pools have caused water contamination in 37 states. In worst-case scenarios, catastrophic failures cause coal ash slurry to flow directly into rivers, streams, ponds, and lakes. The largest coal ash spill in U.S. history occurred in 2008 in Kingston, Tennessee, when 5.4 million cubic yards of toxic sludge spilled into a nearby river, causing a Superfund site which could cost $1.2 billion in remediation costs. In February of 2014, 82,000 tons of coal ash spilled into the Dan River in Eden, North Carolina, near the district of Ms. Adams, who just spoke a moment ago, after a pipe burst, causing a coal ash impoundment failure. Costs for that cleanup are $300 million in the short term and could potentially have a much greater long-term impact. The majority of coal ash ponds are located in close proximity to vulnerable communities. It is important to protect those communities from being disproportionately affected by poor coal ash storage. This common sense amendment ensures that if this bill were to go into effect, vulnerable populations are protected from the potentially adverse effects of coal ash exposure. And so, Mr. Chairman, I urge my colleagues to support the amendment. At this time, I would like to reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from North Carolina reserves the balance of his time. For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, speak against the amendment.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Reluctantly, Mr. Chairman. First, we learned about this amendment before us late on Monday. Of course, I was struck by the gentleman's deep concern for vulnerable populations, people who, because of circumstances or physical attributes, are more at risk than others when it comes to certain environmental exposures. The gentleman knows well that I share this concern. He knows it from our committee work earlier this year on TSCA Modernization Act. We reached a unanimous committee position in this area, in fact, throughout the bill. So I reached out to him early Tuesday morning to tried to explain the gentleman's amendment was problematic as it was drafted, and we offered to work with him on a version that addressed this concern without, frankly, gutting the rest of our bill. Despite hard work from both teams and time, staff all day Tuesday, we were not able to reach the agreement, so the gentleman opted to revert to his original proposal, which is what we are considering now. I see 3 basic problems with the amendment as being offered. First, it gives the EPA administrator effectively unilateral veto power over the entire coal ash bill upon any EPA finding that somewhere, somehow, a vulnerable subpopulation is not protected. This, of course, undoes the entire premise of the bill that brings together the best of the EPA proposed rule and states' expertise and dedication in regulating solid waste through permit program. Second, the gentleman defines vulnerable subpopulation by listing around 10 specific population groups for protection. Everyone on his list I agree with, including, for example, infants, elderly, persons based on racial or ethnic background. But when we include some on the list, we can wind up excluding others. It's a basic principle of legislative drafting. I think we should be sure to include all vulnerable groups and we suggested to the gentleman language to do just that. I regret that we were not able to reach an agreement. Third, I'm not sure the gentleman's amendment passes constitutional scrutiny. I understand that we in the Congress have sweeping power to waive requirements of law, but I don't think we can give a single administrator power to cancel a law altogether. In my view, only the President himself has that power, subject to override votes in the Congress. I was and am more willing to work this out with the gentleman, and we did try. I regret very much that this amendment does not reflect those efforts, so I have to urge a no vote. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back my time.
Gentleman from Illinois yields back the balance of his time. Gentleman from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you very much. It is true, Mr. Shimkus, that we did make a valiant effort yesterday to try to reach some common ground on this amendment, and regrettably we were not able to get there. But I thank the gentleman for his courtesy and his willingness to have the continue to try to legislate in a way that will protect vulnerable communities from this type of activity. At this time, I'd like to yield to the ranking member of the Energy and Commerce Committee, such time as he may consume.
Gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Thank you. I want to thank the gentleman from North Carolina, and I rise to support his amendment. It raises an important point that should be part of our dialogue on all environmental issues, and I thank my colleague for offering it. The unsafe disposal of coal ash poses serious risk to human health and the environment. Those dangers are particularly acute for the minority and low-income communities that often live near coal ash disposal sites. Unfortunately, this dangerous spill would diminish protections for those communities most at risk. Important safeguards would be eliminated, and significant discretion would be given to states to choose whether or not other safeguards will apply. This discretion will hurt hotspot communities for the same reason that they host these dangerous communities, because they do not have the political clout and voice that other communities have. We must recognize the disproportionate risks faced by vulnerable populations and ensure that those risks are addressed, and that is what this amendment does. While I don't support the bill overall, I do urge my colleagues to support this amendment and vote yes, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from New Jersey yields back the balance of his time. Gentleman from North Carolina is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I have no further speakers.
Gentleman from North Carolina yields back his time.
I yield back my time.
Gentleman from North Carolina yields back the balance of his time. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from North Carolina. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The amendment is not
Mr.
agreed
Chairman,
to.
I ask for the yeas and nays.
Pursuant to, does the gentleman ask for recorded vote?
I do ask for a recorded vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from North Carolina will be postponed. Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, proceedings will now resume on those amendments printed in Part C of House Report 114-216 on which further proceedings were postponed in the following order. Amendment number 2 by Mr. Pallone of New Jersey. Amendment number 4 by Mr. Connolly of Virginia. Amendment number 5 by Ms. Adams of North Carolina. Amendment number 6 by Mr. Butterfield of North Carolina. The chair will reduce to 2 minutes the minimum time for any electronic vote after the first vote in this series. The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on Amendment number 2, printed in Part C of House Report 114-216 by the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Pallone, on which further proceedings were postponed, and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 2, printed in Part C of House Report number 114-216, offered by Mr. Pallone of New Jersey.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted.